Czechast, a podcast in English about Czech and Moravian society, history, culture and economy.
Hello and welcome to Czechast, the podcast in English about all things Czech. I am Vít Pohanka. My guest today is political scientist, university lecturer and writer Milan Babík. Few Czechs can match his academic journey in the field of international relations and the liberal arts. After leaving Czechia as a teenager, he went on to study at some of the world's most prestigious universities.
I did a total of 2 years at the London School of Economics. I actually spent my third year at Colby College studying abroad at the London School of Economics on an exchange program. And that's where we realized that we kind of clicked, and I went back there to do my master's. So a total of 2 years in London and then 5-6 years in Oxford.
And in Oxford, what was the specialization?
I went to, my college was St. Anthony's. My advisors were Tim Garton Ash, who's quite renowned around here, and then Jennifer Walsh, who advises the Canadian government, or has been until recently.
That remarkable academic career eventually led Milan to become director of the Václav Havel Presidential Library in Prague. He didn't stay for very long, and he obviously knew what he was doing, because today the institution is going through the biggest crisis in its history. Major sponsors have withdrawn, key figures have left, and its very future is uncertain. I assume that everyone involved was united by one thing: respect for Václav Havel's intellectual and moral legacy. Milan surprised me.
I'd have to respectfully disagree with that assumption, actually, based on my experience with the board members.
You mean my assumption about the respect?
About the respect for the heritage or
legacy,
or the notion that the legacy was the overarching goal and the goal around which they were united. That, unfortunately, was not what I found when I worked there. I realized that I myself was quite naive, coming into that job thinking that that's what.
Our conversation also ventures well beyond the Václav Havel Library. We discuss the state of democracy in both Czechia and the United States, political polarization, the changing media landscape, and why liberal democracy appears to be under growing pressure on both sides of the Atlantic. Despite all that, Milan refuses to give in to pessimism.
What gives me hope is not the news, not what happens in high politics. What gives me hope is my ordinary human relations with my children, my family, my friends. I think this is where any hope, if there is any hope, still lies. Ordinary human decency and the ability to work together around things that matter.
So here is our conversation.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.
So my name is Milan Babík. I live in Prague at this point, having lived here for a year and a half now. Before that, I spent almost 30 years living in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada. What do? Currently, I teach at Anglo-American University. I teach courses in international relations and diplomacy and methodology, political methodology. And I have just published my first novel, so I suppose I am not just a university lecturer, but a budding writer.
And is that novel published in English too? Or?
No, that's actually in Czech, published by Prostor publishers. It's not just my literary debut. It's also my debut in my native language after spending 30 years writing in English.
Well, first of all, what is the book about and what is the title?
So the title is Kulda čeká na tank. It's a war story which consists of two storylines. One of them is set in contemporary Ukraine, in the Donbas region, the front lines of the current conflict. And the other one is set in a normalization era, Czechoslovakia, a small town, and traces the life of or a childhood of a small boy living right next to the Soviet barracks.
And then, as you mentioned, you have been writing in English, I suppose, mostly. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because for me, when I started writing first stuff, journalistic stuff, I found it easier to write in English than in Czech. And I suppose it was just because it wasn't my native tongue. I wasn't so shy, so to speak, and I wasn't afraid to make mistakes because I knew I wasn't a native speaker. So, there would be a kind of degree of tolerance that I probably couldn't expect if I wrote and made some mistakes in Czech.
Well, I learned to write in English. It really has to do with my background, having really spent a good chunk of my teenage years in the United States at an American high school and then university and so on. So really, this is where I started writing, from just basic essays to more advanced stuff, and then ultimately scholarly articles and books.
So how did that come about, that you ended up at high school in the United States?
As life happens, so a lot of stuff that you would never expect, accidents, and some of that deliberate choices. It was in the mid 1990s, so not terribly long after the Velvet Revolution here, when there was some foreign money in this country earmarked for students, high school students, to go study abroad. The Foundation for Civil Society, which was a New York and Prague based organization, ran a national competition and selected a couple of high school students from the Czech and Slovak republics at that point, and just sent us off for a year to study at British and American boarding schools. And I was one of the lucky ones to receive a scholarship.
And where did you go? Exactly?
I went to Berkshire School, which is a boarding school in western Massachusetts, in the mountains, lost in the woods, so to speak, in the middle of nowhere. Looked and looks nothing like America as we like to imagine it, cityscapes and national parks and so on. So a very different kind of environment. And that was something that also was very formative for me. When you look at the country from within, it frequently doesn't match its outer image or its appearance to the rest of the world. So.
I think we will get to that again. But are you Pražák? Are you born in Prague?
No. I'm from Northern Moravia, from Šumperk.
From Šumperk. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So what was it like for a young man, a teenager from Šumperk, to come to the US?
I thought I was a young man, but I was a child, really. It was very difficult in many different ways, mainly because of the foreign language, which back then, you probably remember, in the 90s, English was still fairly new at Czech high schools, so many of my teachers were just 2 lessons ahead in the textbooks. So I did not have adequate language skills, although I thought I did. And the moment I found myself at Berkshire School, I realized I just did not understand anything at all. So it was it had to be a very steep learning curve.
When I came to the US with my son back in 2008, actually, he was second grade at elementary school. And I was just amazed how quickly he learned. He was like a sponge. He started speaking fluent English in, a month and a half. I'm not exaggerating. It was really that fast.
Yeah.
I suppose you were just a little bit older.
I was a little bit older. I was 16. But you're right. In some ways, this kind of an approach, being thrown in at the deep end of the pool, so to speak, and left to swim, makes it easier to learn the language properly. You don't have any sort of bad habits that you bring with you. It is much more difficult because you're literally learning the language like a child, just observing and mimicking and repeating and figuring out the context It also poses some interesting problems down the road. You are not quite capable to translate quickly from one to the other. But the big benefit is that you are almost a native speaker.
I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I've met people. I'll give you a positive example. Dusan Neumann, who's been in the United States since 1980, I think. And he's still capable of speaking perfect, very good Czech, you know. And I've met people who had been in the US just for a year. And when they start speaking Czech, they have problems. They are starting to use English words, and it sounds very unnatural. And a lot of people think it's a kind of, that they are posing, etc. Have you got a similar experience?
Of course, yeah. Also, because back in the 1990s, there was no WhatsApp and no live streaming and real-time media and so on. So you really spent a lot of time in isolation from your native linguistic context. And I did lose my Czech. It sounded much like you've just described. And it was no posing, it was literally difficulty trying to express myself in my native tongue. And then the language slowly came back, unexpectedly, thanks to my children, who were born in the United States, and I decided to raise them in Czech. So I literally started with baby Czech and made my way all the way to
so you kind of learned again through teaching.
That's right. Yeah? Well, yeah. And speaking literally with little children, it sounded very odd. I was quite hesitant to, let's say, do radio or TV interviews. I even spent some time apologizing to those who invited me. I was quite embarrassed by it, but that's just what happens when you are in a place where you do not have any fellow Czech speakers. And back then you still did not have the technologies that enabled you to stay in touch with the native language.
Just to give the listeners a little bit of a context. So what happened after the high school, if you can just kind of briefly sum up, what happened afterwards?
I spent my second year at Berkshire School thanks to a scholarship from that boarding school. Then I received a full scholarship to Colby College, which is a liberal arts institution in Maine. And then I received another scholarship to the London School of Economics to do my master's degree, and eventually ended up at Oxford University doing my PhD. And that set the stage for a teaching career in the Western world.
It's an amazing summary, if I think about it, from Schumberg to some small town in Western Massachusetts, then London School of Economics, Oxford. I was just wondering, London School of Economics, I know it's a big institution, but I had the honor, I would say, to work for BBC World Service for some time from Bush House, London, which is very close to the main building of London School of Economics.
Aldwych and that's right.
So how long did you stay there? I mean,
I did a total of 2 years at the London School of Economics. I actually spent my third year at Colby College studying abroad at the London School of Economics on an exchange program. And that's where we realized that we kind of clicked, and I went back there to do my master's. So a total of 2 years in London and then 5-6 years in Oxford.
And in Oxford, what was the specialization?
I went to, my college was St. Anthony's. My advisors were Tim Garton Ash, who's quite renowned around here. And then Jennifer Walsh, who advises the Canadian government, or has been until recently. And I studied international relations and wrote a dissertation on Woodrow Wilson and the cultural foundations of liberal internationalism.
So I just wonder, I mean, I wanted to ask you in the end, but I cannot help asking now. I mean, after so many years in, between Britain, the US and Czechia, where do you feel at home?
That's a really good question, and I'm at home, and it's going to sound maybe strange. I'm at home wherever I am. I am the home. I'm at home in Mid-Coast, Maine. That's where my children were born, and I have many good experiences from. I'm at home in Oxford. I'm at home in London. I'm at home now in Prague. That's my most recent and newest home. But the other side of the coin is I'm a stranger and an outsider and a visitor to all these places as well. I always leave a part of my identity behind, and then I want to go back to it.
You know, I have so many questions. I don't know where to start. But let me ask you. So now you spend most of your time here in Prague?
Yes, yes. Because I work at Anglo-American University, I have to be here during terms, fall term and spring term. I have quite a bit of teaching to do, but in the summer I try to cover my other homes as well.
And so you mentioned that one of your sons is here, yeah?
Yes, I have two sons. The younger one has decided to make the move with me a year and a half ago. So he attends high school here in Prague. The other one, the older one, has just finished high school in the United States, and now part of him wants to join us here in Central Europe. So he's thinking of studying at Vienna at the university. Part of him wants to go to my alma mater, Colby College.
I didn't even ask where the mummy is.
The mummy is in the United States.
She's in the States.
She's in the States, yes.
And she's American, I suppose.
She's American, yes.
Of course. Right. Well, so many questions. But let me kind of go back to the questions I prepared. Still, looking back, you know, when you left... it was already Czech Republic by then. It was after the separation with Slovakia, and built an academic career in the States and that between Britain and the United States. Tell me, I mean, when you were leaving, did you ever think, you know, that it would lead to this?
No, it only makes sense as a journey with some kind of a logic in retrospect, in the rearview mirror. Back then, in 1995, when I, got on the plane to the United States, I had different ideas about what I wanted to do in the future. I saw myself as a Czech foreign service, as a diplomat in the service of this country, and then that came to an end very abruptly right after that first year in the United States, when I realized that rejoining the Czech educational system, jumping back after that year of absence, would not be easy at all. So part of the reason why I stayed in the United States and accepted the scholarship from Berkshire School to go back there actually had to do with the various barriers and obstacles to my rejoining my classmates at the gymnasium in Šumperk and so on.
Well, this is Czechast, the podcast in English, but about all things Czech. So let me just briefly ask you, what do you think is good and what do you think is bad about the Czech educational system? I know it's a very broad question, but if you were to kind of think of the things that come first to your head when we think negatively about the Czech educational system and positively.
So I'm speaking from a comparative perspective based on my experience in the United States, the United Kingdom, and so on. Here, and I mean especially the high school system, and to a lesser degree also the basic or grammar school system. It's very top-down. It's very tied up. It's very constricted with rules and curricula that do not cater to individual interests of students and prescribe to them what they have to learn, frequently without giving them any kind of context. It's just a ton of data that doesn't make much sense to them. They don't even know why they have to know it. The reason that I really sort of gravitated towards the system in the United States, at least at the boarding schools there, and I understand that these are a different kind of game than public schools, which are not as well funded and so on. But there, the first question is what it is that you want to study. What is it that interests you? And then around that, your curriculum is structured. And I found that interest in anything in the subject matter is the most powerful motivating force when it comes to wanting to learn things, discover them. So I did not have to spend any time learning things that I didn't care about. I picked my courses. I was free to study economics in high school. I was free to study foreign languages. If I wanted to do Japanese calligraphy, that was an option. So I find that there it's bottom up. It's based on interest by the students. It's experiential. It's very much hands-on. It's a process of discovery driven by curiosity. Here, I find that frequently you are subjected to curricula and books that you don't really know why you need to know and how they will be useful to you in the future. And I think that's a...
Just to be fair, let me mention that I did some programs in Czech actually about the Czech educational system, and we need to say that there are a lot of people who are trying to change that.
Yes,
and,
of course.
And it is changing at least partially. But back to the US experience, let me just mention, when I was in Washington, we actually lived in Bethesda on the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and my kids started going to school there. So my son actually, when we were coming back to Czechia, was at middle school. And then he ended up in the Czech system, and that was not so nice. So we went to Poland, and that was even worse. I'm talking about public schools. Well, worse. Right. I mean, it was okay, but this kind of top-down system was definitely there. But then my son had this kind of idea based on his experience from Bethesda, Maryland, where the public schools are extremely well financed because it's a wealthy suburb, all the money goes there. So he actually arranged for himself, he founded himself, we had to help him, to go on an exchange program at high school. And he went to the town of Circleville near Columbus, Ohio. Circleville has got, 8,000...
a small town, Midwestern town, basically.
Midwestern, Rust Belt, very much so. And he was surprised, It wasn't the public school system that he was used to from Bethesda, Maryland. So basically, I'm just trying to say there are huge differences.
There are, absolutely. I should have prefaced all of this by remarking that my experience is entirely basically from New England, and that's a pretty specific region that prides itself on high quality, well-funded public and private education, and is quite different from places like, let's say, the Midwest, the Rust Belt, or even Deep South in the United States. I'm sure the experience would be quite different down there.
But back to you. You mentioned that you had perhaps an idea as a teenager that you would work for the Czech diplomatic service as a Czech diplomat. Well, it didn't work out in the end.
No.
But you did kind of serve a public institution, I would say. Well, privately funded mainly, but still very well-known institution, and that is the Václav Havel Library, which you led in 2024. But first of all, let me ask you like this. How did that happen?
I was approached by the board looking for a new director after my predecessor in that role, Michal Žantovský, left after a very long and distinguished service in that role. 8 years, I believe he was there. So it lasted about 6-7 months, perhaps. The courtship, if you will, a lot of interviews, including in person here in Prague. And I have to say, to be fair, that I spent quite a bit of time sort of spreading the legacy of Václav Havel in the United States before that, through large-scale events, conferences, multi-day theater, museum exhibit, and so on. And Michal Žantovský had the pleasure of attending one of these at Colby College in 2022. Tim Snyder was there, Martin Putna, and some of the others, Jacques Rupnik. So I suppose this is what attracted the board and people around the library to me and my name. I'll also say that there were many people around here who were discouraging me from that job, noting some possibly toxic tendencies within the institution. But ultimately, I did decide to essentially terminate my scholarly career in the United States and relocate for that job to the Czech Republic, including my children and everything that entails, looking for schools and so on. So that's how that came about. And in June 2024, I was inaugurated as the new director.
So why, I will ask very bluntly, why didn't it last longer?
And I'll answer very bluntly as well. I literally do not know to this day. Well, in retrospect, I I have a hunch. I could detect some deep problems within that institution right away. I think I can admit it now. I started looking for a different job only 3 months into my tenure at Václav Havel Library. And I think the problems that are miring the institution now were quite apparent to me already back then.
And perhaps we should explain to the listeners that the institution really is in trouble because the main sponsor basically left. There's the director of 1 year, I think, was that Tomáš Sedláček. Also, well, he left as well. I mean, I don't know actually what's happening now. What's the institution? What's the latest?
I can't say that I've been following the news that closely, but my understanding is that there is an effort by one member of the old board, which resigned, to put together essentially a new Václav Havel Library, perhaps even with Tomáš Sedláček still in some kind of a role, either as some kind of an ambassador, perhaps not a director. And I think that now the big question in the air is whether they'll be able to continue using the rights to Václav Havel's literary works and so on, which are obviously in the hands of the widow, Dagmar Havlová.
You know, I'm absolutely an outsider, and it's not that I mean, Václav Havel is such a big name. In our history. And I just wonder, as a completely lay person who knows absolutely nothing about the institution, what the heck is going on? I mean, why is it that a group of people who obviously, all of them, have got deep respect to the, let's say, the heritage or still the historic kind of legacy of Václav Havel, why can't they find why can't they work as a team?
See, I'd have to respectfully disagree with that assumption, actually, based on my experience with the board members.
You mean my assumption about the respect?
About the respect for the heritage or
legacy.
Or the notion that the legacy was the overarching goal and the goal around which they were united. That, unfortunately, was not what I found when I worked there. I realized that I myself was quite naive, coming into that job thinking that that's what we were all supposed to be doing. So for me, it was a deeply sobering, sad, and professionally humiliating experience. So insofar as there is any future for the institution, I do not believe that that future will come together successfully if any of the old board members are involved with the new Václav Havel Library, if there is one to be formed.
That's kind of heavy stuff. That's heavier than I expected talking about that. But, perhaps we've got some listeners in the United States. Just to explain, I mean, this is a very new tradition, unlike in the United States, where we've got the presidential libraries.
That's right.
Barack Obama now opened his center. That's
a wonderful building in Chicago. But that was actually the intention and Václav Havel's desire to basically have a library in the style of American presidential libraries.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Exactly. It would be a place that would serve as an archive, certainly, and a documentation center. But for him, I think the really important characteristic was to have a place that would be alive, that would be a meeting place, a vibrant place, a hub of civil society where people could come together and discuss things, not just pertinent or relevant to his tenure as a president or dissident or playwright, not just dwell on this archival evidence and endlessly regurgitate what was the meaning of this or that passage in his works, but really relate his ideas to contemporary issues and the future, obviously all in pursuit of freedom and democracy.
I mean, I don't want to overgeneralize, but I just wonder what it says about Czech society and and the Czechs kind of relationship to figures such as Václav Havel. We've got still Institute Václava Klause, Václav Klaus Institute. Have you ever been there, by the way?
To the Klaus Institute? No. And perhaps I should pay them a visit. I'm not sure they'd let me in, but perhaps they would. It is sad. It is truly sad. And we're talking in the 90th year after Havel's birth. This is the 90th anniversary of his birth. Should have been a year of celebration. And I do understand that he is a polarizing figure, and I completely respect my fellow citizens' right to disagree with my view of Václav Havel. I do regard him as an important figure. I do think that some of his writings and ideas are truly timeless and applicable to all kinds of contexts. I completely respect those who disagree with me, and I'm happy to engage in discussion with them. But nonetheless, I'm very saddened by the fact that those who should gravitate towards him and celebrate him and really use him to buttress and support their position in defending our civil society today, because these are truly difficult times when it comes to democracy and freedom. I was truly saddened to see that they do not work together, and in fact that Václav Havel perhaps is not even the main motivating factor, that there are other interests behind the functioning of that institution, that it in some ways had nothing to do with Václav Havel at all.
Well, without trying to be kind of devil's advocate in a sense, I would say, well, we just don't have that tradition. It's never been here. The Brits don't have that tradition. What would they, there would be there are probably Queen Elizabeth II libraries, right. I suppose, but not in the sense like in America. I mean, it's right. I just wonder, I'm trying to think of any other country, and specifically in Europe, where you would have an institution like that.
I can't. And I don't think that Václav Havel needs a library to be celebrated and studied and discussed and sort of used by civil society to energize its efforts in defending democracy and freedom. Certainly not. But that said, I think that at least some of the elements, some of the programs run by the Václav Havel Library were quite vital, were very important.
Example?
The club program, right? The regular meetings, evening meetings around various speakers. That's something that certainly I find very beneficial. Just a place to meet, discuss, hash out different ideas, free and open to the public. I think that's exactly what should be happening. That's the kind of parallel structure to the government that lets you escape the media noise, the political speeches, and really engage with your fellow citizens in a safe place, right? To perhaps discuss your disagreements instead of sitting down in front of your computer at night and spewing off a couple of angry posts on Facebook or Instagram or whatever else. So anything that promotes that kind of civil discussion, and Václav Havel Library did that, that to me is very important.
From one difficult subject to another, and that is the state of American democracy already indicated. I mean, we are going through hard times, and you mentioned Tim Snyder, who I suppose, spoke to him and who speaks kind of bleakly, I would say, comes to bleak conclusions when it comes to the state of liberal democracy in the United States. Having said that, I've just finished actually reading a book, Been There, Done That. It's by historian Greg Jackson. I'm not quite sure, how prominent he is even. But basically he argues that America has repeatedly experienced periods even of fake news. And he comes up with these great historical examples. Even, the kind of media war, we could call it, between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. And then, yellow journalism, all that stuff. In many ways, isn't this just another cyclical kind of, problem that we have, both with media, economy, because obviously economy is changing. What do you think about that?
I think there is something to be said for the argument that history does repeat itself. There is a cyclical component to these processes. And it's not just about these fake news periods. It's also the periods of awakenings, as they're called in the United States.
It was a great awakening.
And many of them actually, first and second and third, even in the colonial period. But at the same time, if history does repeat itself, it never repeats itself exactly.
It rhymes. Who said that? Mark Twain, I think.
It does rhyme, but I do think that there are some things that are fundamentally new, different, and I have in mind especially technology and communication technology. So what's the transformation of media and how we experience reality, which is remote. Reality for us is fundamentally mediated, and to the extent that in the realm of media, we are really in the middle of a revolution that's unprecedented, I think, with the internet and the rise of AI and fake news and disinformation and our inability to get our bearings, right, in that realm of facts and narratives. We can't even tell anymore what is real and what is not real and what is reality because it is mediated so many times over. So I think that that's different, and to that extent what's been happening now is quite unprecedented and different from the previous periods of fake news and disinformation.
Again, this is Czechast. We should be talking about Czechia as well. Do you see that the Czech politicians and Czech government, the present Czech coalition, is more or less successfully copying some of the strategies that we have seen, probably with Donald Trump when it comes to communication, when it comes how to kind of present themselves?
I do. They're populists. They are clearly out to scale back the role of free, independent media in our society, which I see as a tremendous threat to a healthy and well-functioning democracy. I also am aware of some of the personal sort of antics, especially by Petr Matsinka and some of the others, which are not about diplomacy.
Matsinka, the foreign minister.
The foreign minister. This is all about kind of politics of distraction and politics of entertainment in some ways, trying to go after the few voters who are unhappy with the way things are and really not pay attention to what matters in issues of national security and foreign policy and diplomacy. Just like we've been seeing in the United States, where one idea is spewed by the president after another, no sort of long-term rhyme or reason, tremendous decline in America's soft power and credibility around the world, leading to the erosion of long-standing alliances, security arrangements, fundamentally transforming the security architecture of the Western world. So I think there is a lot of potential damage to be done.
I don't want to kind of artificially always look on the bright side of life, like Monty Python, but, being, I have to say, depressed, watching what was happening about Greenland and around Ukraine, of course, I thought, well, probably the one positive thing is that Europe at least now realizes, we have to stand on our own legs for God's sake. For how long, even Barack Obama wanted to withdraw forces from Europe. He didn't do it because who protested was Germany, themselves. So in a way, isn't there something, positive about this, the aspect that I mentioned, at least?
Yes, the notion of weaning ourselves off of this dependency. And really for Western Europe, that dependency is even longer because it does include the Cold War, the American nuclear umbrella, and the notion that the United States is the anchor of the Western alliance. That all has to change now that the United States is either truly trying to scale back its presence or is just being erratic. It doesn't matter because so much of the security arrangements depend on credibility, right? It's a psychological notion. The notion that if something were to happen and a NATO member were to be attacked, there indeed will be collective response. So in some ways, you don't need to have things escalate to that point. It's just about credibility. and that credibility has eroded. So I think you're absolutely right that this is an opportunity for Western Europe and us as part of the West to wean ourselves off of this dependence on the United States. I'm just distraught by the fact that this hasn't been happening as quickly as I would have anticipated, given what we've been watching on the other side of the Atlantic. So to me, I wonder if things will have to deteriorate more, if there will be a hard historical lesson that'll be truly sobering, if things that are already quite clear to the Ukrainians, right, will be clarified to us in a similar fashion. I wonder if it'll take that kind of lesson, and I hope not. But when I see the state of what currently in this country is the opposition, unable to work together, unable to really make any kind of positive difference, I do not see the short-term to medium-term future too brightly.
Right, you are. And speaking of the Czech opposition, I again recently read a book about the first Czechoslovak Republic, the period between the First and Second World War. When you read, what was going on in the parliament, it really, again, I wonder, been there, done that,
Done that. Yeah.
It seems to me that it's just a, history that perhaps doesn't repeat itself, but rhymes at least. There's another thought that I have. I remember the first visit of George Bush Sr. back in 1990, it still was, to Prague. I was 23 years old then, 24 years old. Then I remember the visit of Bill Clinton in 1994. And why I mention that, it seems to me that we were under this spell, that America is this, that they really represent America. And of course, there were presidents. But when you really go to America, America is very diverse. That sounds like a cliche. And we were under the impression, it seems to me, that all Americans are, politically correct. After all, political correctness, I think, came to Europe, mostly from the United States. But there are an awful number, part of America that is not politically correct at all. And I think, in a way, the same applies to the Czech politicians. The Petr Matsinkas have, they have always been there. It's just what is new now that they are in the government. Whereas, for example, Dr. Sládek, who was a kind of right-wing extremist in the 1990s, he never made it to the government. So aren't we just seeing something that's always been here? And just because of perhaps the better communication possibilities for them, that they are kind of popping up?
It is possible that we are seeing that only thanks to the media and the way we literally carry the media with us on small screens in our pockets in real time, always. But once again, I'd still argue that even back then, and that's not too long ago, we're talking the 1990s, in the United States, you still had what used to be called a kind of a bipartisan consensus around certain issues. People still could work across the aisle, as they called it. Republican congressmen and congresswomen and senators working around important issues that pertained to the United States as a whole, especially issues of national security, with members of the other party. That I think has disappeared. I think even issues like, what's national security, support for the Ukraine. There is no partisan consensus around these issues, which used to stop, as Americans say, at the water's edge, right? Issues of partisan politics and disagreements for domestic politics, fine. But when it comes to American national security, right, we need to lock step and work together and make sure that we advance the cause of freedom in the United States around the world. I don't see that in contemporary American politics anymore. And even when looking at contemporary issues like the war in Ukraine and support for Ukraine, you could look at the Republican Party, right? Ronald Reagan would be completely at odds with the current administration. The current administration could not be called Republican in terms of its foreign policy if we were to use the standards that the Reagan administration used to work around. the Reaganites were keen not just on containment, but beating back the evil empire, and telling Mr. Gorbachev to take down this wall and so on. So.
And when it comes to Czechia, interesting thing, I interviewed retired General Michanek the other day, who now works for Severo, about the fact basically that even though we are just after the NATO summit, where obviously there was a lot of kind of division between the president's office in Czechia and the prime minister's office, superficially I would say, or he, General Michanek would say, on the fact, who's going, who's not going, and blah, blah, blah. But basically, when you look what President says, what Matsinka says, what Babík say, I mean, they want to strengthen. They want more money for security. So it seems to me that they are kind of agreeing on the principle, but their egos and their kind of personal, what is the word? Animosities.
Right. Are
on the surface. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yes, I think that some of that is kind of for show and to cater to their respective voter camps, right? And I especially mean the more extreme sort of parts of the Czech electorate, like the motorists, right? And I'm glad to see that underneath all of that, there is at least a degree of consensus that Ukraine does need help, that there needs to be more in terms of what we do for national security, that we need to invest more in our armed forces, so on and so forth. That's absolutely a step in the right direction. It'll be very difficult, given the budget situation and the national deficit and debt and so on. Now the efforts to defund in some ways public media. So.
Okay, just one last thing. You mentioned the fact that we get our information through media, social media, stuff like that. So last year, actually it was after Donald Trump was elected for the second time, I thought I need to go and see it for myself again. And I was wondering how to do it. And I decided to cross the United States. I flew to New York. I bought a bicycle and I cycled from New York via Philadelphia, by Trenton, I have to say first, Philadelphia, Baltimore to Washington, D.C., and then via Cumberland to Pittsburgh. That's what I did last year. And this year, in May, I went from Pittsburgh to Chicago. And why I mentioned that, I posted on Facebook once, America is no Trumpistan. By that, I didn't mean that I agree, with what's happening. I just meant, America is not Trumpistan. During the first year in his second term in office, the last time I checked, it's a record number of suits. He's been taken to court, his decisions, record numbers. Totally. Because the cities fight back, the states fight back, organizations fight back. As we are talking, just a few days ago, the Supreme Court decided against him in the birthright decision, basically meaning that if you are born then, you don't get the right. But when I wrote that America is no Trumpistan, there was angry rebuke from many of my, good colleagues and friends, I would say here. Basically, they immediately kind of thought that I was pro-Trump or something, which I pride myself to be impartial, at least I try. Why I mention that? Do you see something in the sense, that America is still America? It's not, because whatever we think about Donald Trump, he's enriching himself and his closest allies and family are obviously enriching themselves. It's, unthinkable before. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court is still there. The Congress is still there. There will be midterm elections. We don't know what the results will be. But the institutions, no matter how hard he tries, perhaps, to kind of undermine them, are still there. Am I wrong?
The institutions are still there, but then again, you can look to the Russian Federation. All the institutions of the democracy are there. But I don't think any one of us would say that it's a functioning democracy. So I think that you need much more than functioning institutions. You need to have robust civil society. You need to have a society that is not as polarized and stratified, including in the area of the distribution of wealth, which the inequality there is just tremendous in the United States, that fundamentally skews the field, right? And really places a big chunk of the society at the mercy or at the whims of the super powerful and super rich, especially in the context of a country where, as you know, right, corporate interests can fund political campaigns. Right?
Yeah.
That's a very problematic issue in that kind of context. So I would agree that America is not Trumpistan, but I would also say that the fact that Donald Trump was reelected, right, after an effort to steal an election, right, after an effort which involved a run on the Capitol, right, sticking to his great lie, for which he never apologized, never acknowledged it as a lie in the first place, I think that's extremely troubling. I think that's a symptom of the malaise that's taking place or unfolding in the United States. I don't think it has to do anything with rational behavior. I think it's a protest vote, right, by a significant number of Americans who feel left behind by the liberal elites, who feel that the liberal governments, the previous governments or Republican governments for that matter, Reaganite or whatever, were just not looking out for their interests, right? And will basically vote for anybody who positions himself or perhaps herself down the road as anti-systemic, right? And I think that's the energy which Donald Trump was able to tap into, right? I mean, I don't think that his policies are rational. I mean, is there anybody who really sees any kind of long-term strategy to what he's been doing? I don't, given that we have flip-flopping and pivots, 360-degree pivots, literally within 24 hours, right? So I don't discern any kind of a long-term strategy there or even policy. I think it's a matter of just catering to the vote of those who were left behind, the populist vote. And there are many people who disagree with him, many people who can't wait for the midterm elections and the next presidential election and are truly hoping that the current Republican Party will be swept out of power and a more reasonable successor will enter the White House. But nonetheless, you still have roughly 17 million people who voted for Donald Trump in the last election. And that's a huge number.
I suppose we could spend hours discussing what Democrats did wrong and, Joe Biden, the way he was, the hypocrisy of the media, really not reporting on his true state, etc. Let me mention just one more. I will come back to Czechia. One more thing that I learned while traveling on a bicycle. I know that you mentioned inequality. We talk about, the distribution of wealth. What you really see if you travel like that is the inequality of infrastructure, which is huge. And you don't even think about it. It's about, basic public transport, basic institutions, which is huge. Places like Baltimore, for example, Pittsburgh, Chicago, and now I will come back to Czechia. We sometimes think, oh, it's horrible there in America. I would say, well, why don't you go and travel around Karlovarský kraj, Ústecký kraj, some parts where Roma live in Ústí nad Labem, parts of Ostrava, it's on a smaller scale perhaps, but it is there as well, isn't there? But I'm not trying to kind of artificially make these parallels, but we have that here as well, don't we?
We do have what we call...
Because we think about Czechia as a kind of, very equal society.
Right. We do have what we call vyloučené komunity, excluded communities here as well. Nonetheless, it's not a matter of difference in kind. It's a matter of degree. We do have them here, but in the United States, the differences are such and so pronounced. I mean, even in excluded communities here in the Czech Republic, you still have things like basic health insurance, right? But think of a country where if you are one of the many unlucky or less wealthy, you have to pay for your health insurance in a marketplace, and it will be $400-500 a month, right? Yeah. You live persistently in debt, which just keeps increasing because of the interest rates, so on and so forth. And the difference is, and I do travel by bicycle as well. I am an avid cyclist. So Maine, which not too many people here have heard about. It's kind of in the backwoods of America, a place where you have beautiful nature, but not too many inhabitants. There, those differences you can see quite clearly as well, and in a manner of just a few miles, right? The summer homes of the super rich, the Hollywood elite, the ex-State Department officials on the islands, and then you hop on your bicycle and you travel 5 miles inland, and suddenly it's those mobile homes and shacks and as you say, infrastructure that just doesn't function. Public schools that do not have enough to serve lunches, and where 40% of the students come into their classes in the morning hungry because their families cannot afford to feed them a normal breakfast. So that's the kind of America that you can experience down on the ground, so to speak.
And I suppose, I mean, I would assume that that's what makes a lot of people kind of angry and pro-Trump, because,
Absolutely.
I mean, no matter, who's in power, I mean, nobody helped them.
Yeah.
So they see that as a kind of, they see him as a savior.
That's right. And it's not just a matter of populists, smart populists like Donald Trump who know how to ride that dissatisfaction. And I want to emphasize that because I was part in the United States of that segment of society, which is in many ways elite. An established liberal arts institution, college, really affluent, where the facilities are world-class and the students come from all over the world, and the yearly tuition is $75,000, right? One of the things that stunned me there and made it very difficult for me to work there was the detachment, right? By the faculty, the leadership, from the ordinary problems of people living just 5 miles down the road. So I think it's also a failure of understanding on behalf of those who should be sort of catering to those who are weak, and do that frequently in at least sort of in the way they teach their political science classes. We want to practice inclusion and we want to diversify our society. But in practice, American liberalism has lost quite a bit of its sort of progressive edge. It's no more about meritocracy. It's much more about, the need to include those from the underrepresented groups. So your achievement, I'll put it frankly, if you're a white male, those are not good times in the United States for you at the moment.
Coming back to Czechia, I have a friend who has got a very impressive CV. He's a Czech. Very impressive CV in both public and private service. And he's 60 and he was looking for a job. And he says, my biggest enemy, my biggest competitor, let me put it like that, against whom I always lose, is a very well-educated woman between 40 and 45. And I think that kind of hits on a similar...
That's fair. Yeah.
Back to that, you mentioned tuition. In Czechia, and again, this is Czechast, but all things Czech, we don't have, on public universities, we don't have, and vast majority here are public universities, and all the kind of Ivy League in Czechia, if we had an equivalent, are public. No tuition fees. What do you think about that, going through the system in Britain and the US?
I think it is wonderful that there are no barriers, financial barriers, for students coming from socially underprivileged backgrounds, and that in that regard, higher education is open to them. At the same time, it overshoots the other side. Many students who enroll in 2 or 3 degrees and universities never finish one of them. So I think there is something to be said for at least some kind of tuition that'll make higher education less of common sense, right? That'll slap some value on it. It should probably be paired up with some kind of a system that would help students from underprivileged backgrounds to clear those hurdles. But to be perfectly frank, I'm all for at least some symbolic at least, might help with the funding of higher education as well. So in the United States, it overshoots in one direction. It is just so exclusionary based on wealth. Either that, or you end up with massive student debt at the end of your degree. Here, it's the other extreme. It's wonderful that everybody has access, but I think that has sort of resulted in a degree of irresponsibility when it comes to the value of higher education.
Right. Well, it's been fascinating. I've been jumping, from subject to subject a little bit, but I found it fascinating. Finally, we've been talking about some kind of bleak things, and I just wonder, what gives you hope these days? If you look at the future of Czechia, is there anything that gives you hope?
So, and it doesn't go just for Czechia, it goes for the United States as well. I'm a dual citizen and I do love both countries. What gives me hope is not the news, not what happens in high politics. What gives me hope is my ordinary human relations with my children, my family, my friends. I think this is where any hope, if there is any hope, still lies. Ordinary human decency and the ability to work together around things that matter. In the United States, I used to give myself hope by volunteering. Coaching soccer at a small rural basic school, which otherwise would not have a soccer team. Coaching a hockey team, which otherwise would not have a coach and there would be no hockey team. So I think that we all have enough energy if we apply ourselves to do things that are important for perhaps not Czechia as a country or the United States as a country, but the small slice of civil society that's around us, that is familiar to us, that we can talk to not through our phones or through Instagram and so on, but we know personally, we have some history. Together we can overcome our disagreements, and we understand that at the end of the day, it's really about cooperating and working together, not constantly paying attention to the things that we disagree about and that divide us.
Thank you very much for your time, and I hope we will talk again if your book comes out in English as well.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And that was Milan Babík, political scientist, writer, and now a lecturer at the Anglo-American University in Prague. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode of Czechast, please remember to follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend it to a friend or leave a rating or review. It really helps others discover the show. I'm Vít Pohanka. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious, and as we say in Czech, naslyšenou.
Czechast, a podcast in English about all things Czech. Whether you're an English-speaking expat living in Czechia and Slovakia, or a descendant of the Czechs, Moravians and Slovaks who left for a better life in America, Australia, Britain or Canada so long ago that you don't speak the language of the old country, this podcast in English is for you.